Hello, this is Stephen Warren Hill. I'm the principal author of Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, and the program director for Chicago Tardis. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Larry, it's Fraser. And you use, they all say, who is Doctor Who? Where is he from? What does he do?
They all say, who is Doctor Who? Where is he from? What does he do? They wonder who is Doctor Who? So I ask you, who's Doctor Who?
Welcome back to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, the podcast that explores the crazy world of Doctor Who collecting and all kinds of Doctor Who merchandise and related materials. And sometimes we just talk about Doctor Who. Great place to do that. Brought to you in part by Bags Unlimited Incorporated and Forbidden Planet. I am Larry Van Mersbergen, and I have been collecting Doctor Who now for 43 years, since 1981. And welcome to our 78th episode. We're celebrating more than just Doctor Who collecting, just the whole Doctor Who world in general. So thank you for being here and thank you for listening. In case this is your first episode, let me introduce you to my background. I happened to open one of the first Doctor Who stores in Chicago that exclusively served Doctor Who fans. It was back in 1984, and I called the shop Bundles from Britain. And, well, many years later, I sold the store to my business partner, and then I kind of forgot about it until a few years ago. I came across a book called Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America. And I couldn't believe it when I found Bundles from Britain in the index. It blew me away. And you can find it on page 384 of that book. It's one of my favorite books, just for that matter, that I'm in there and that it made a difference. So you can, of course, find a link to buy this book on the front page of our website at drwhocollectors.com. We don't make any money on this book. This is not my goal here. My goal is to get a book into every collector's hands so that you have this as a wonderful piece of reference material and a great story of how Doctor Who happened in America and all the things that affect it. Of course, it's not totally inclusive. There are many things that were not collected in the book, but there's only limited space. So I treat it like the Hitchhiker's Guide for Doctor Who in America. And my company, of course, is the Mostly Harmless. So there you go. We are part of the Direction Point Doctor Who Podcast Network, and we've got some great podcasts out there if you're for all the interests in Doctor Who. So you can find great stuff at directionpoint.org. And of course, if you happen to be a Doctor Who podcaster, join our network. There is no cost. All we do is we create 30-second trailers that we have put in our other podcasts and get your listenership up a little bit. My listenership has gone up at least 30% since being part of the network. And that's important that we're reaching more people. So if you want to hear some other great podcasts, I highly recommend Time Streams, Police Box in a Junkyard, Doctor Who Literature, the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, Traveling the Vortex, the Doctor's Beard podcast, and many, many more. So if you want the full list of shows, go to directionpoint.org. And speaking of web links, there's always two that I include on this show because I think they're very important. The first one is timelash.com, and when you get there, click on the TARDIS library. That is a great place. Create a free account and keep track of some of your media and your want lists and what you have and what's available, and it's pretty up to date as far as what's being released in books, in media, video, audio, vinyl record, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, don't count on magazines and figures and things like that, but just the media, that stuff. The other link, of course, is more complete as far as research goes. Back in the day, when we wanted to find out about something, we had our Transcendental Toy Box books from, Telos Publication, but unfortunately, the book would be published and more stuff would be available. So it made sense to move it to a website. And that website is doctorwhotoybox.co.uk. and that's, of course, Howe's Transcendental Toy Box. And we're talking, of course, about David J. Howe. Great guy, great friend, and an amazing collector. He and I have had many conversations over the years, including a couple appearances on the podcast. So that's a great place to find just about everything that has to do with Doctor Who. Of course, if you're looking to buy Doctor Who items, I can recommend a few great places for that. First on my list here is DoctorWhoStore.com. It's in the name. Alien Entertainment. They have a lot of sales going on. They have a lot of clearance stuff, but they also have a lot of great items for Doctor Who and many other things as well. And if you happen to live in the Chicago area and you want to save that shipping cost, you can have it be picked up at the store. No charge for that. So there you go. They're open Wednesday through Saturday in the Lombard location, and they also have a location in Logan Square. So for more information and hours, visit alienentertainment.com. We carry a lot of great items at Forbidden Planet right on our website at DoctorWhoCollectors.com. Just go to our merchandise links and select the items you want to buy. It'll take you through the checkout at Forbidden Planet, and Forbidden Planet will give us a little kickback for going through our website. That's how we help pay for our podcast, basically. And don't forget our eBay store. We just listed a whole bunch of Target books. Next to me, I've got 3 stacks of Target books that just came in, and we're going to get those out there on the web store. All proceeds benefit the podcast, so that's important to note. Let's talk about Who North America. Keith and Jenny, amazing people, good friends of mine as well. You can find them at www.whona.com or whona.com, and they've got some great stuff as well. Don't forget, of course, the original Who Shop of London. You can find them at thewhoshop.com. Wonderful people out there. So while you're on our website, of course, in addition to all the podcasts posted on our website, we have one of the very complete guides to Doctor Who classic hardcovers. I'm talking about the W.H.L. and Ellen Wingate hardcovers that came out from 1974 all the way to 1988. And people out there who are collecting them want to try to get a full set, including all reprints, and we try to make sure that our list is up to date and accurate. We're even including a small price guide to help sellers and buyers when they're negotiating. So we try to look at sold prices, but we're also taking in mind how many were printed and where they were distributed. The ones distributed in the United States are lower cost because more mint copies are available than ex-library copies. So check it out. All right. So what's going on? Not much has changed since the last episode, but I'll let you know the big events of what's coming up in 2024 and early 2025. We've got Chicago Tardis 2024 set for November 29th to December 1st. That's Thanksgiving weekend. Join us for our own celebration of Doctor Who, the best convention in the Midwest. We've got a lot of guests announced here, including a couple more guests on the way. So let's start with our 3 doctors. We've got Paul McGann, Sylvester McCoy, and Joe Martin, the Fugitive Doctor. Oh, it's our first visit to Chicago. So that's 3 doctors. We also have another 3 here, 3 Blake 7 actors, Jan Chappelle, Brian Croucher, and Sally Nivette. Oh, you got to see these folks. Also coming, of course, our good friend Jason Haig-Ellery, the big honcho over at Big Finish, and he's bringing over another one of our good friends and former podcast guest here, Sadie Miller, the daughter of Elizabeth Sladen. So you got to meet her. Also coming is Sonny McGann, Paul's son. He's appeared on Big Finish a few times as well. I have it in mind, and I'm just going to say it. Rumor has it that Sophie Aldred and Fraser Hines will be joining us, but that has not been official yet. So keep tabs on here or at ChicagoTardis.com for that information. Now, Doctoberfest, which is now called Infiltrate, is set for Saturday, October 19, and will be held at the Who North America shop right now. If it happens to move to a hotel, we will let you know, but that's the plan. So we're hoping that the number of people signing up will force it to move to a larger place, because I would prefer to be in an indoor venue than an outdoor venue, especially with all my stuff that I'm doing. I'll be presenting my new panel, A Living History of Classic Doctor Who Books, 1964 to 1996. Some of these books no one has seen in the United States up close. So we'll have some authors there as well. I heard a rumor that we might have John Peel there, which would be great. He's also been on the podcast. So there you go. If you happen to miss that Doctoberfest panel, I will be presenting that same panel at Chicago Tardis, at EgoCon, which I'll talk about in a moment, and Considity 25, which I've been to Considity for a few years. EgoCon, of course, is set for Saturday, August 17th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Century Curling Center in Plover, Wisconsin. I have been confirmed as a guest by email. I'm just waiting for my name to get added to their website. So more to come on that. You've heard me talking about those hardcovers before, but we get a lot of emails and messages and rumors about, hey, I saw a third printing of that book or a fourth printing of that book, which highly doubtful. But anyway, I'm always on the lookout for what we call concrete proof. In other words, copy of the spine, the cover and the back of the book, the inside title page where it shows the printing. That would help a lot in keeping our records up to date and keeping our collectors informed. So if you have a book that I question the existence of, contact me at drwhocollectorspodcast@gmail.com and send photos and just let us know what you got. What's happening on today's show? Today's show, I'm excited to have with me the author, the principal author of Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, a book I've mentioned on every single podcast, Stephen Warren Hill. He's a good friend of mine. He's also the program director for Chicago Tardis, and we get into a long discussion about fandom and how the book came about and his role at Chicago Tardis. So that'll be an exciting conversation coming up soon. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. If you are a patron on Patreon, thank you so much. We have special video content on there, including the interview we did with Peter Purvis at the $15 level or above. I'm trying to put more exclusive videos up there of my collection of, more specific things that might, be interesting to you. So if you want to find us, we're at patreon.com/Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. You can also support us at our principal podcast provider, which is Podbean. So if you go to drwhocollectors.podbean.com and click the Become a Patron button, you can support us for as little as $1. We welcome your contribution. Our theme song is Who's Doctor Who, composed by the great Barry Mason and Les Reed. Don't forget, they wrote hits for Tom Jones. That actually charted. So, and don't forget that Jimmy Page plays lead guitar on this wonderful song, which I thought, wow. So a little Led Zeppelin, a little Tom Jones, and of course with lead vocal by our friend Fraser Hines. So, if you want to share this podcast with your friends, and I hope you will, you can hear us almost anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and many others. So you can also find us at Direction Point at directionpoint.org. All right, time for my time. Spoilers ahead. So if you have not caught up on the current season of Doctor Who with Ncuti Gatwa up to the Empire of Death, please fast forward to the break, and that way you won't be spoiled. So I'm giving a heads up here on spoilers. So I've been asked to give my feedback of the season, and I want to be honest. I have been a Doctor Who fan since 1975 in the United States. That's when it started airing here in Chicago, and I've never missed an episode, no matter what. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I absolutely loved it. I loved the stories. I was excited. I was entertained. I'm not the type of person to get too nitpicky about continuity or things like that. I mean, it's out there, and you can go to any forum online and find people who want to pick this stuff apart and be negative. And that's fine. That's freedom of speech. We have that here, but I'm going to give you my opinion. I really enjoyed the season. I really did. And bringing Sutek back at the end was completely a surprise and a really good one. And of course he evolved from the simple, dog-like appearance to a little bit more of a terrifying, god creature who, just basically, brings death. And, kind of led up to that a little bit with, the celestial toy maker and the maestro, the god of music, and of course, the Beatles and all that. That was kind of an interesting story too, about how a little event, that can shape the future and how you have to go kind of change that back and make it so that it never happened. It's happened in Doctor Who before, but it was very interesting to see. Just a lot of things around Ruby Sunday as well. I thought Millie Gibson was amazing. 73 Yards was really quite interesting as well. How she saved the world from a terrible, terrible prime minister by using that 73 yards thing to make that work. And I thought, wow, that was really something. Just very, very interesting how that all worked. The landmine episode, I don't have any notes in front of me. I'm just going off my memory here. That kind of, I did notice the landmine looked a lot like the one from Genesis of the Daleks. I think that was on purpose, but I thought it was a good story. I really did enjoy the story. The whole, I'm still waiting on the, Mrs. Flood thing to see who she is, because they keep teasing us with that. It would be nice to know who she is. I mean, she's been wearing, outfits that suggests she's Clara, or she's a Time Lord, or she's the Ronnie. Who knows? But let's just wait and see. But I really did enjoy the stories. I love Shooty as the Doctor. I can't wait till the next season. The Christmas special will be coming up, and it's really nice. I've been sharing that. Some of my actor friends in Doctor Who, like Katie Manning and I have talked about it. She really enjoyed it as well, and we just had nothing but positive things to say back and forth. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'm really not happy when I see people just completely rip it apart and thinking, wow, this is Doctor Who. Yeah, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm not saying you don't, but I'm trying to increase fandom. I don't want to tear it apart. And have there been terrible stories in the past? Yes. Yes, there has. You're not going to stop that. But again, still entertaining. Still Doctor Who. It's all Doctor Who to me. And that's how it works. So I'm happy. I can't wait for the Shooty Gatwa memorabilia to start coming out. The marketing hasn't been there quite yet, but we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's my time. So thank you for listening. If you have fast forwarded through, we are into the spoilers here. So there we go. After the break, we will have our conversation with Stephen Warren Hill and the most outrageous offer. Stay tuned.
Traveling the Vortex.
Are you ready to embark on an epic journey through time and space? Join the thousands of Whovians around the world who've discovered Traveling the Vortex, the ultimate Doctor Who podcast for die-hard fans and curious newcomers alike.
Every week, we dive deep into the Whoniverse, discussing the episodes, theories, and hidden gems. We dissect the Doctor's adventures, share behind-the-scenes stories, and explore the legacy of this iconic show.
Traveling the Vortex brings fans together, fostering a global community of Whovians. Whether you're a fan of classic or new Who, there's something for everyone.
Join us on this incredible journey as we unravel the mysteries of time and space.
Don't miss out. Subscribe to Traveling the Vortex today on your favorite podcast platform.
Traveling the Vortex. Your ticket to adventure awaits.
Traveling the Vortex is a proud member of the Direction Point Podcast Network. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hi, I'm Juliet.
And I'm Nathan.
Experience Doctor Who from the very beginning through a classic fan's eyes.
And through the eyes of a new Who fan.
Reminisce and relive those classic moments with Nathan as he offers fun insight.
Or experience them for the first time with Juliet as she dwells on social issues, history, fashion, and the size of a flashlight.
We're the Time Streams Podcast.
Find us on Spotify, Stitcher, or Apple Podcasts. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
The vervoids are probably the best dirty joke in Doctor Who.
They're hermaphroditic plants.
A lot of plants are.
So there you go. It's based on science.
No, they'll ship anything.
There are probably 11 and handle shippers out there. You just have to drill a hole where his mouth is, and you're all set.
You know he needs the room. I've seen it in pictures.
I'm not saying you're not a fan. I'm saying you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Doctor Who gives a drunken Doctor Who podcast for the end times.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. Keep collecting.
Up there is the scanner, those are the doors, that is the chair with the panda on it. Sheer poetry, dear boy.
And now it's time for the main feature on the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. My guest today is the director of Gallifrey Base, the largest Doctor Who forum on the internet, the programming director for Chicago Tardis, the best convention in the Midwest for Doctor Who, and the principal author of Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, a book I talk about on every episode of this show. So please welcome to the show, Stephen Warren Hill. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, thank you, Larry. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to have you here. It's rare that I get to talk to another fan who actually has almost the exact background I have.
Yeah.
You started watching Doctor Who in 75, probably a few months after I did. You grew up in the area. You actively participated in a fan club in the 80s, just like I did. Mm-hmm. You attended, we probably walked past each other at several conventions in the 80s.
Undoubted.
And of course, in fast forward, we're connected through various means, including Chicago Tardis. We've worked together on there, as well as Consinity. And so let me just ask, for my listeners here, in a brief summary, tell us how you got into Doctor Who and that journey.
So in 1975, I would have been 9 years old. Mm-hmm. And it was my habit, as was, I suspect, the habit of many 9-year-olds, to sit in front of the TV and watch something and then turn the dial when you got bored with what you had on. And I would do that. And of course, there's no remote, so you would sit directly in front of the TV and you would turn that ka-chunk dial. And I'm sure, I don't have a memory of it, but I'm sure that what happened is I turned over to Channel 11, WTTW in Chicago, and probably saw a monster, or either that or heard the theme music, and it made me stop. If it was a monster, it undoubtedly made me stop and just watch, because I was already into monster movies and stuff like that. But it could have been the theme music. It could have been something else. I suspect maybe it was also had to do with seeing something that looked like a soap opera, because it was shot on videotape on the interiors, and it looked weird, and it didn't look like a soap opera, but it felt like a soap opera. So that may have given me pause as well. So any combination of one or two or all of those things made me watch. And I remember loving it and saying, okay, when is this going to be on again? When can I watch it again? It was Claws of Axos, by the way. So
right.
That was the impetus to make me, well, not that I wasn't already pulling out the TV guide every week from the Sunday Sun Times and circling the things that I wanted to watch. But then then I was going through looking for Doctor Who specifically to see when it would be on. And the killer thing was, it wasn't. Right after I discovered it, I had it cruelly taken away from me by Channel 11, who the next time it aired, it was on at 11 p.m. or something like that. And that was way past a 9-year-old's bedtime. I couldn't watch it. And I think, I know I saw it a few times in Chicago, and I think that they had some other screenings that were earlier times, past 1975. But it really wasn't until it hit a slew of more PBS stations in the later 70s. By 1978, I was living in South Florida, and I saw a commercial. It was a commercial for a movie. It was promoted as a TV movie for something called Doctor Who, and I saw the commercial. I know that. Now, you got to understand, it's been a few years, and at my age, I don't really have that deep memory of seeing it. So, but I recognized the theme music, and I said, I know that show. I remember that show. I loved that show. So there's a TV movie that they're showing, and I don't remember. It was one of the local affiliates. It wasn't a PBS station. It was one of the local affiliates who I suspect was blacked out from showing some local sporting event that night and had to fill the time with something. And they filled it with Doctor Who. And then shortly after that, the PBS station in South Florida started airing it. And also the NBC affiliate, weirdly enough, started showing it, I think, very early in the morning, like 7 or 8 in the morning, in a half-hour time slot. And from there, I was hooked because I had gone to a bookstore and found Pinnacle Books, Doctor Who and the Daleks, and the second one, the
Day of the Daleks, probably.
Day of the Daleks and the Doomsday Machine.
Doomsday Weapon, yes.
Doomsday Weapon, which were the first two Pinnacle books. And I bought those, and I read them, and I wanted more. But so here I'm watching Doctor Who, and I'm reading Doctor Who novelizations, and it's wonderful, and it just sort of went from there.
Okay, and at what point did you join a fan club and be part of it?
I didn't join a fan club until 1986, so that's quite a long period of time there, from picking it up again in 1978 in South Florida. When I returned to the Chicago area, so I lived in South Florida for 4 years, and then my family moved back to Chicagoland. And they were showing it, regularly on Channel 11 at that point. And so I was watching all as they got the new episodes, and I was watching when they aired Five Doctors, and Channel 11, as you know, would rarely promote local Doctor Who related events. But once or twice, they did have a slide with voiceover, Marty Robinson telling us about a Doctor Who convention coming to the area. Those are the ones that I knew about, because I didn't have other ways of finding out about conventions. I didn't go to comic book stores or anything like that.
Right.
So when I would see these adverts, those are the events that I went to. But then, sort of getting my foot in the door with attending conventions on my own, I knew that the Ultimate Celebration was happening the weekend it happened, but I couldn't afford it. I was too young. I had no income.
Expensive.
Yeah. I so desperately wanted to be there that weekend. I was just depressed the whole weekend. I just wanted to be there so badly, and I couldn't. But I planned on going the next year, and 1984 was the year I graduated from high school and got a job. So I had income for the next year and was able to go again by myself. And yes, I made friends, but they were just weekend friends.
Right.
You hang out with some people, you save seats for people, and then you say, see you later, and you never see them again.
Right.
But when I started my job, I was hired to be a computer operator at Harper College in Palatine, Illinois, and mainframe computer operator, and one of the other operators doing another shift, I saw him reading a Doctor Who book one day. I said, "Hey, I'm a Doctor Who fan too." And so we became friends, and we got into watching Doctor Who together occasionally. And when there was an announcement of a convention coming up in St. Louis in 1986, we decided that we would go together, drive down. And that convention was the fateful one for me because, and I'll try to make this brief, I know I ramble, but
no, go for it. It's okay.
We got there, and we sort of went off and kind of did our own thing for about half the time, and then hung out together half the time. But at one point, I think he had gone to sleep, and I saw a flyer on the wall for something called Save Who. It was a video that was going to be shown in the video room. And it was advertised as a parody of Doctor Who, a comedy. And I thought, that sounds very interesting. And I'm wide awake and don't have anything to do. So I went to the video room to watch it, and it was brilliant. It was filled with deeply, deeply inside jokes about the production crew and all kinds of things that, the casual Doctor Who fan who had only seen Tom Baker just would not have got. And I was so impressed. And then in the closing credits, I saw that the group that made the video was from Libertyville, Illinois, which was right in my neck of the woods. I thought, no, wait a second, really? And I had, this was the dawn of the home video era. And, I had an interest in filmmaking. I was really keen on learning how to make my own movies. And they were doing it, this group in Libertyville. So I talked to them because they had a dealer's table in the dealer's room where they were selling their videotapes. And I talked to them the next day and got their card. And when I got home, I called, said, I definitely want to join your club. And, okay, come to the next meeting. And I did. And kind of really pushed my way in. Not that they resisted, because they liked me. And they were still making videos. And as it turned out, their guy who was playing the Sixth Doctor was going off to school, and they needed somebody to replace him. And I just casually at one of the meetings said, well, I suppose I could do it if you wanted me to. I think I do a passable imitation of Colin Baker. I think I could probably fill in for him. And they were like, what? Do that again. And okay, it's not as good as it used to be.
No, it's still good. It's still good.
I'm old and rusty, and I just kind of threw that one.
Well, so is he. So that's okay.
Yeah, right.
That's okay.
But yeah, I blew them away with my Colin Baker impression, and so then I was in their videos as the Sixth Doctor, and that was my jumping into organized fandom.
Okay.
From disorganized
fandom. Yeah, that's very similar to my story, because I started out just myself, and I of course had this idea of opening a store, which I did, and then I went looking for fan clubs, and mostly stuck to, I didn't go north, I went kind of into the city and into the suburbs. So my first stop was the Emissaries of the White Guardian in Skokie, and that was the elusive Gordon Lurie and his videos.
Oh, yeah.
So that was good for a while, and then all of a sudden we showed up for a meeting, and the house was dark, and that was it for the club. So, but then I went to this convention in '83. It was, I believe, at the New Fantasy Shop. And I got in the program, it had a list of all the clubs in the area. So that was really cool. So the first place I called was the Many Companions of Doctor Who in Chicago. And their Lord President was like incredibly impressed with me on the phone. He lived on like I remember on Devon and Spalding, I think, in Chicago, and I lived up in Skokie. So he's like, and of course I was 15 years old. So he's like, "Oh, no problem. I'll come and get you." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, no problem." So he drives up. This little Chevette pulls up in front of my house, and my mom's like, "Okay, see you later." He's like, "It's Doctor Who. It should be all right." She introduced me to the show, so she knew what was going on. So we drive down to Kelvin Park, and I've had like 6 boxes of merchandise that I put out on the table, and that was, of course, everybody's looking around, going, "Wow, I've never seen this stuff before. This is really cool." So at the point where the meeting was getting gavelled into opening. Matt Sturm was his name. He said, "Well, all right, everybody, I think everybody's like waited long enough. Let's go shopping." So it was a very successful.
Nice.
But the people that I interacted with, the first person to buy something from me is, you and I both know, Bob Wettendorf. Was the first guy. The second guy was Gene Smith.
Okay.
And so he dropped about $200, so I'll never forget that. But, after we were done and I was packing up, Gene was helping me carry boxes back out to Matt's car, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Here's my number." And that's how we got Bundles from Britain into a legitimate business. So, but then the other part of it, going back to your video, the club wanted to shoot a film because that was the rage of the time, and early 85, late 84. And so they had a script called The Shadow Lord. And it was written by award-winning author Rhonda Del Bacchio.
Okay.
Who I guess has won some awards out there. Some of my people know who she is. And she wrote some pretty amazing script. And so we had a pretty good cast. I was at the time I had longer blonde hair, and I did the 5th Doctor. Matt did the 6th Doctor because he had curly red hair. And Gene Smith was going to be the 2nd Doctor. Bob Wettendorf was going to be the 7th Doctor. We didn't know who that was going to be, but he was going to be this future Doctor. And a guy named Bill Eubanks was going to be the 1st Doctor.
I remember the name.
You might have remembered him if you went to the 84 Spirit of Light. He was the Davros cosplay that wheeled around. You actually got his picture in Doctor Who magazine. So he was the artist. He drew the cover for the Bundles catalog. He drew all right.
That's why I remember the name.
He was actually, we were amazed by him because he was a bona fide actor. He had a Screen Guild card and all that. He was in commercials. He did stage. He was a clown. He was all this. He was a graphic artist, so he was able to draw, and his ability to recreate the Doctors on our logo was just amazing.
Yeah.
And so the only thing is, we had a woman named Jackie who played the 3rd Doctor. At the time, we were already, female playing male roles and all that, which is long before anything like that was done. And I can't remember. We were looking for a Tom Baker person, but we never got it off the ground because we had one video camera and nobody really knew how to operate it. So it never really got going, and nobody had costumes. We didn't have money. But I do remember it just, and getting kind of transitioning here to the book, Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, for my listeners out there. And that section that you do on videos is a great picture of you and Jennifer from Reality Warp, which, I thought, wow, the costumes and some of these other films that kind of got done, as you said, were just simply amazing. I've seen a few fan films over the years, and they were quite good. And that's just one amazing part of this story. So let me ask this question now. It probably took, how long did it take to compile all this information to produce this book?
We worked on the book for a good 10 years. And there is a pretty detailed explanation, I think, in the introduction. But,
yes,
in short, it was, a bunch of different people had the same idea at around the same time, that there should be a book that talks about the history of the show in the United States.
Yes.
And, I think we were mainly thinking about conventions, but also we had a unique history here in the US that just was not at all like the history in the UK. So we thought that that would be a great idea for a book. And one of the catalysts was Gallifrey 1 having Lucy Chase Williams as a guest one year, and she did a presentation on the first Doctor Who convention in the U.S., which she was co-chair, or she was co-chair.
Yes, I think so. Yeah,
with Amy Krell, I think, and she had, it was an interesting panel, and the people who were there came out of it thinking, this is such an interesting topic. We really should do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we kind of, I keep saying we, and by we, I mean, my closest friends and Sean Lyon and a couple of other people just sort of thinking, let's do something. Let's, finally, we've been saying this is a great idea. Somebody should do it. Why shouldn't it be us? Let's do it. And I can't actually remember when it happened in relation to, because I had 2 books published by Telos Publishing on classic horror films, and I can't remember honestly if it was before that or after that. So I mean, it kind of slightly makes a difference. Was I a published author already, or wasn't I? I don't remember. But
that's okay.
When we did decide to go ahead with it, I went and approached a couple of different publishers, and Telos wasn't interested because it was an American thing.
Right.
And they didn't think that they'd be able to sell it. And there was another American publisher of Doctor Who books, nonfiction books, that also said, I definitely think you're the right person to do it, but I don't think we're the right publisher to publish it. So in talking with Arnold Blumberg, he had been thinking about creating his own publishing company, and he was in on the ground floor too with the project itself, and said, well, if we can't find another publisher, I'll just be the publisher, and that'll be my first book. Well, it turned out not to be his first book because it was 10 years making, but that, ATB Publishing is the publisher of Red, White, and Who. And of course, Arnold did the graphic design and the layout, which was a massive job, and he did a fantastic job at it, because part of this was cramming in so many photos in a supportive way, supporting the text, and also doing little sidebars, and it was kind of pretty complicated. And we had discussions about, should it be a larger format, physical format? Should it be a coffee table size book? And we had all kinds of design discussions, and I'm really still quite happy with the way it turned out.
Oh, yes.
And I wish it could have gotten into more libraries, but
yeah,
because it's a very good reference book, really.
And that's kind of why when I bought this copy and I went through it for the first time, I was just like, this is something I need to have, like, literally within arm's reach, because I have referred to this book in many episodes for many different things because of how good it is at documenting things that happened specifically in this country. Mm-hmm. And just even when I glanced over the acknowledgments, I recognize a lot of the names, and not just the celebrity names, but people I've encountered over the years.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, I at the time this was started, I wasn't actively in the Doctor Who world, so I didn't know it was being produced.
Right.
But I thought, when I got it home, and I thought, okay, let me just look in the index. And when I found bundles from Britain in there, I just like, are you kidding me? This is that company I created when I was 15 in my parents' bedroom. I'm like, you gotta be joking me. I'm like, so of course I thought, okay, that's pretty significant. I was absolutely genuinely blown away. And of course, some of the articles I've seen in here, like from the Chicago Tribune and the Sun
Yep.
Times and some of the TV guide things that I remember seeing over the years, and especially the chapters on merchandise that was specific to the United States.
Yeah.
And that was helpful to me just recently because I just got I was just reached out to by a guy named Roy something from the BBC saying, "Hey, I got your name from David Howe. We're doing the next Blu-ray release, and part of the extras, we want to photograph stuff from the Barbara Elder Company and Spirit of Light."
Oh,
I said,
okay.
"Oh, I can help you there." So I just sent off a whole bunch of photos to them, and they're like, "Oh, that's great. Just let me check the spelling of your name." So I'm going to be in the next Blu-ray. So that was kind of cool. But I needed to go back because I don't have my Barbara Elder catalog anymore. But your book lists a lot of the stuff that she put out.
Yep.
And I'm intending, and listeners, I will get to this, I promise, about because I get a lot of questions about the Barbara Elder Company, and I was just curious if you remember your research, because I had a catalog. I think we probably threw it away after it expired. I wish I'd kept it because there was so many things in there that used to scratch our heads because there were items you could buy for wholesale and there were items you could not buy for wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain Doctor Who items that were full price, and no matter who you were dealer, whatever. And we were like, well, this is crazy. How do you make money on this? And I said, well, you can't. But I remember one of the things I got from them was this guy.
Okay.
And the hat with the diamond, with the lodge, the diamond logo, was one of the things we got from Barbara Elder. And we had a bunch of those. We had the 10 banks that were through her, and the like the badges and the buttons and the things that came all out of that. So I'm just wondering, how did you find out about Barbara Elder? Did you, because they weren't around anymore by that point?
Right. True. Well, I know that we had scans of catalogs. So somebody in our group
had one.
Yeah, had one. Someone. But one of the biggest things was the first person we interviewed, even before we started writing the book, was Larry Sherritt.
Oh, Larry, of course, yeah.
And Larry was close to Barbara for a while, so we got a lot of information from him about how her company essentially became the de facto official arm of merchandise for Doctor Who in the U.S. And a lot more information came from talking to the Spirit of Light.
Norman Rubinstein?
Norman.
Yeah.
Interviewing him was very enlightening. A lot of
imagine.
Yeah. So there was so much. I'm going to use the word fighting, but maybe that's not fair.
That's okay.
But a lot of tension and pulling, push and pull, like tug of war kind of thing going on up in the upper echelons of merchandising that even you as a retailer probably were not aware of. And
probably not.
That may have had something, and I'm only speculating, but that may have had some effect on what things could be offered for wholesale, what things couldn't, if it was something that the Barbara Elder Corporation introduced and sourced. Maybe those were fine for wholesaling, or vice versa. I don't know. I'm only guessing, but that seems to be a likelihood, likely possibility there.
Yeah, I do have one item from her I haven't within reach because I just photographed it. And have you ever seen this one before?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the Barbara Elder bumper stickers.
I don't break for Daleks bumper sticker.
And of course, that goes directly against the Spirit of Light one that does break for Daleks.
I break for Daleks, yes.
So I thought that was... and those, of course, were exclusively United States. And I thought, what an interesting thing. And of course, as a retailer with a title of bundles from Britain, we really struggled to find ways of bringing things over here that couldn't be gotten through traditional channels. And so we had a few tricks up our sleeves. I mean, my big secret was I had 5 or 6 pen pals that I used to write to in the UK, and they were very happy to go to a used bookstore and spend a couple of pounds with, a lot of books, and I would just pay the postage and whatever they paid. They weren't looking to get rich. They were looking to help out. And they thought, well, it's not fair that the United States can't get this. So that was the idea. Now, of course, nobody's willing to help you. They want to make a dime on top of their dime. And that's usually how that goes. And I still encounter the problem when I'm sorry, we don't sell to the United States.
Yeah.
And that was something I experienced in Doctor Who magazine when I saw all these beautiful tiles. I got to have those. So I figured out what the pounds would be, plus I padded the shipping and I sent it off, and 3 weeks later I got an envelope back with my check and order saying, we're very sorry, we cannot ship to you. And I thought, wow, that's a shame. And of course, I haven't seen those tiles offered anywhere since that time. And the same thing with the TARDIS tuner that was offered through the magazine and things that. And I do have one of those up there. It still works, but it's that. And the other part too, and not to, of course, I completely encourage my listeners to get this book on every show. In fact, prior to this interview, it's in the introduction, is the uncovering of the mysterious books from the Aeonian Amarian Publishing House.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The 5 titles: Revenge of the Cybermen, Image of the Fendal, Android Invasion, Giant Robot, Loch Ness Monster, and Day of the Daleks, which still confound my Scottish and English friends who go, what's that? Whenever they see a picture of my shelf. And we just talked about the Android Invasion one on my 1984 hardcover podcast, which just came out. And talking about how this was published here, or 80 copies were done. And you actually talked to the owner of the company.
I did, yeah.
So how did that conversation go, and how forthcoming was he?
He was very forthcoming. His name was, if I remember right, Jed Klaus.
Yes, that's right.
And he has since passed away. When I talked to him, he was very sick, and he knew that he knew that he didn't have a lot of years left in him, unfortunately. But he was very forthcoming, and what I was trying to get from him was just any information, as much information as I could about those books, the purported publication of Genesis of the Daleks that never happened, even though it was listed with an ISBN in one of the editions. The print run, the process that they followed, the weirdness about the Pinnacle logo appearing on some of them. And he explained so much and just gave me a ton of information. And it was a lot to put together, and it was a source of, it was one of the most rewarding sections to work on, I think, for Red, White, and Who was.
Oh, I agree.
There's so little information on those books. And I found some more information online about the physical process they used to reproduce these books. But not all of them were made the same way. And they physically all look different.
They're all different. Not a single one is like the other, including the fact that on one book they just put Dix as the author. Another one, it's got the logo, and then the logo with a triangle, and no logo. And some of the covers are blank. Some of them have a generic, like I think company logo, and some have that Pinnacle logo on the front. It was really bizarre when I finally got all the books together, and I thought, wow, this is the strangest collection of published materials, because almost every publisher has a I worked for a publishing house for 5 years. We had a set template of things of how different series worked. We were a music publisher, so if we did an organ book, they all looked the same. All of our other books had the same size. These were all different sizes, and I thought the only other run that I remember talking about that had a different size was the annuals. For some reason, 1977, all of the annuals from World were larger because of some printing dispute that they had, and then the next year they went back. So that's why that one stands up on your shelf a little bit more. But yeah, wow. And I thought this was the section of the book that I used the most when we covered these books. and talking about them. And wow, how the fact that I had a shop in the mid 80s and we didn't know about them. Of course, there was no internet back then to do searches or anything.
Right.
And the local distributor we used was called Glenwood Distributors. I don't know if you remember that name.
Don't remember that.
They were on Fulton Street, which is interesting because the building that they occupied is now an outdoor restaurant. So, but I remember driving down there and they had a pretty good section on Doctor Who. They had the magazines, they had some Target books. At the time they were, this is before Lyle Stewart was up and running for the most part.
Yeah.
But their wholesale price was $3, so they were very expensive. But they were, we always rated whatever they had, and especially right before the conventions, we would run up a large bill from them. And usually, I remember the guy being real skeptical when Gene was filling out the paperwork, and the next day after the convention, he would come down and pay him in cash. So it was like, oh, there you go. Okay, your bill's covered. So that was an interesting part. And of course, the other part of the book that really got me too is that you've got some things. I mean, some of the pictures are so good. I mean, there's color throughout the whole book, which is really wonderful. The story of the pinball machine is a good one too. And my younger brother actually owns one of the pinball machines, and he did a lot of his own research as well, which I thought was interesting. But the whole idea, of course, that they were giving away Doctor Who licenses in the 90s because you want a license,
right?
Here you go.
Right.
And that's what Virgin Publishing said too, until it came to a point where we want our license back. Sorry.
Yes,
we're done.
For the pinball section in the book, we had uncommonly good access because Nick Seidler, one of the co-authors, works for MSOE, and the designer of the pinball game was a former MSOE student.
Well, that works.
So Nick contacted him and was able to interview him and get a lot of inside information about the whole pinball machine saga, which another thing that is really unique to the book itself is you won't find that anywhere else.
No,
I wondered if you don't mind me going back just a second to the hardcovers, the Marian Aeonian hardcovers. When we were still working on the book, and I realized that these were, as far as anyone could tell, including myself, and from what Jed, the owner, told me, they really were rare and really low print runs. It's still questionable as to whether the print runs that are quoted in the books are accurate. I can't say definitively, and he wouldn't say definitively. Not that I asked him specifically, but he didn't say. But at the time, I started searching regularly, scouring bookstores, online, sellers on eBay, Amazon, and buying up every copy I could find of any of them. So I have here in my house, I think the one that I have the fewest copies of is Giant Robot, and I think maybe I have 3 of those.
That's the one I see the most online when I still do searches.
It's weirdly I will jump ahead here and say,
sure,
the last time I went looking, I could find almost nothing anywhere, unless I wanted to order from Brazil.
Right.
I wanted to find how much are these books selling for these days? Nothing out there. So I did, I dried up a lot of the supply that was out there, and I still have them, and will be selling them off eventually at a higher price than you and some other friends of mine have recently paid for complete
sets.
I
was going to mention my listeners. It was thanks to this gentleman that I was able to complete the collection, because I had 3 of the books and I was able to get the other 3 from Mr. Warren Hill here at a really friendly price too. Which I thank you for. That was still for me. That's one of the best parts of the book, and having those photos and having the information. And it's just one of the books that I say to every collector, you've got to have this book on your shelf because there are so many good things in here that will help you understand how, not just how things worked here in the country, but the little things like even the fan clubs and how, because I only knew of a few of them, and I'm looking at pictures here. I'm like, oh, Chris Brainerd. I used to talk to him on the phone back in the day because he did a lot of video distribution himself.
Yep.
And folks up, folks down in Oak Park, in the unit of regulars, and all those folks that I had contact with back in the day. I remember driving out to Oak Park, and I could only spend a half an hour there because I had to have the car back. But it was really something else. And of course, the pictures from the first early Visions convention in 1990. There's some great stuff in here, and you even managed to get Gene to pose for a photo, which to this day he and I have never been photographed together. And ever when I suggested, he goes, "Yeah, I don't want to." But it's a great thing. Let me transition on here because you've got one of the most important jobs at Chicago Tardis, and that's being the program director. And I kind of equate that to, I'm a high school teacher, and every year we go through scheduling, making sure that sections don't conflict and that everybody can get to what they need to get to. So what are the biggest challenges in your role? I mean, you have the job of not only selecting what gets programmed, where it gets programmed, what room it goes in, who's speaking, who's not speaking. What are those challenges, and how have you addressed that? Because I know you were the assistant director for a while, and then just recently in the last couple of years you've moved into the full position. So if you don't mind telling us about that.
One of my best friends, Jennifer Adams Kelly, was the director for a long time, and she passed away. And Gene asked me to take over programming. So that's what I've been doing. It's there are a number of challenges, as you might expect. One of the challenges is I either don't seem to have enough. I have too many panel ideas and not enough panelists.
Right.
So, we put out 2 calls publicly. One is the first is the call for panel ideas.
Right.
And then I sift through those and I combine similar themes into one panel, things like that. Maybe say this one's not good. And the first thing I do is separate them. Doctor Who, non-Doctor Who, because we're a Doctor Who convention, and even though I will program non-Doctor Who panels, I'm going to always favor the Doctor Who panels, right?
Right.
So if I have too many non-Doctor Who panels, those are going to be the first ones to go. Mm-hmm. And then putting in a panel idea doesn't mean that if we accept the idea that you get to run the panel necessarily.
Right.
Because maybe somebody else put in the same idea. Mm-hmm. And I might think that they're a better fit for the moderator of the panel or whatever. And I will make judgments like that because I have learned that some people are not good at it.
I can agree with that.
we listen to feedback too. So a lot of that comes from our attendees saying this person probably shouldn't have been asked to moderate this panel. And sometimes they were the right person to ask. They just weren't good at it. Right. There's all kinds of considerations here.
Oh, sure.
The first thing I do when I start scheduling is I don't schedule photographs and autographs.
Right.
So that's done by Gene Smith and Taylor Dethridge, and in the 2 of them work out the photograph and autograph schedule. That goes on my schedule, my master schedule first, so that I know what's left.
Right, of course.
What times are left for me to program around.
And a lot of those things with photographs and autographs are contractual with the artist, so those have to be put in a certain place by their their needs, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So then I know how much time I have left for everybody, and when they're busy, when they're not busy. the programming of main guests is almost as difficult as the programming of the side panels. But the side panels is more straightforward because you get the ideas suggested to you. You get the volunteers who just say, yeah, I would like to be on this panel. And chances are, if you put yourself in for Chicago Tardis to be on a panel, chances are you will be on that panel.
Oh, yes.
Because there's not a lot of people that answer the call for panelists. And I always fervently wish for, and this is why I'm saying it on your show, more kids. I want children. I want young fans to be a part of panels. So kids, parents, tell your kids if they've ever wanted to be sitting up in the front of the room to tell the audience what they think of a panel topic, please have them submit their name because we want them to be more involved. It's one of my constant goals is to keep the younger fans involved and feeling just as much a part of the convention as anybody else.
I agree.
I try very hard to do that. But programming the main guests is that's where I have to get more creative. And sometimes my ideas work. Sometimes my ideas are looked at askew by some of our guests, like Peter Davison and Janet Fielding last year when I introduced them to do the Topsy-Turvy interview, which was my idea of two guests where for half of the hour, one of them interviews the second, and for the second half hour, they flip reverse positions, and they basically interview each other that way. And they didn't hear the explanation before they went out on stage, so they were like, "What are we doing? Oh, this makes no sense. What are we supposed to be doing out here?" I've learned too that as a base concept, it's still a good idea, but if it turns into just two friends sitting there talking to each other with an audience listening, that is fine.
Oh, yeah.
My biggest disappointment with that, where they went with it, and I have no trouble with them going wherever they want, of course, with an idea. But my biggest disappointment with what they did with it was that they took audience questions right off the bat. And I really did want it to be more of a chat between the two of them. But maybe they weren't feeling that. So, I no complaint. If you guys are listening, please, I'm not complaining. Please come back.
If Peter Davison, if you're listening, first of all, thank you. No, I have to say, I've been a part of Chicago Tardis for several years. My panels have always been full, especially the collector showcases, because everybody wants to see the stuff, which is kind of neat. I always see a lot of kids, and I try to do always one game. I've been doing that for the last couple of years, and I'm going to keep doing that as long as I have games in the shelf. I want to, Dodge the Daleks last year was very popular. No one had ever seen that one before, and it was just a game board that they took out of a book and put on with pieces, and everybody was like having a fun time with it. War of the Daleks and all that. So it's a lot of fun, and I love to see kids getting more involved. And I always love interactions, especially when I go as my fifth Doctor, and the kids all come up, and it's so much fun. Chicago Tardis, a lot of it reminds me of the Spirit of Light conventions from the 80s. And then I realized, of course, I was there with Gene, and a lot of those ideas came forward for that. And of course, just to let listeners know again, I mentioned it earlier in the show, Chicago Tardis, of course, is every Thanksgiving weekend at the Westin in Lombard. And single day tickets just went on sale, and guests have started to be announced. We've got 3 doctors, Paul McGann, Sylvester McCoy, and Joe Martin will be there. More guests, I assume, to come. This is also the 25th anniversary. Any big plans for the 25th anniversary that you can talk about?
No, nothing yet. And it's been hard because the last few conventions, we've done a lot of sort of retrospective type programming. And there's only so much of that you can do, right? I mean, before you get repetitious. So it's going to be even harder to come up with things. Sometimes I try to split up if I want to have a panel that talks about eras, how am I going to define an era? And the last time, I think it was very broad, huge. Everything from the start to 1989, everything from 1989 to 2005, and everything from 2005 onwards. Massive chunks. But sometimes you want to be more granular. So I don't have any firm ideas in mind yet.
Okay.
But for me, it's still early days as far as programming ideas for the convention.
Okay, and of course, since we're on the Collectors Podcast, tell me about your Doctor Who collection. What have you got that's unique? Or I mean, you already talked about the American hardbacks; those are very unique. But anything else that comes to mind that is to you personally valuable? Not necessarily monetary, but something that you like.
Well, I'll start off by saying I'm not an action figure collector, so I don't really have any action. I just looking up there, I see 3 Cybermen and a.
Yep. I've got my giant robot here with the scarf and hat. Oh, my hat.
Yeah.
So this guy here, he's the hat. I had an extra scarf and hat, and I had a giant robot without any shoulder pads, and I had to replace all the rubber bands. So there you go. He's my new mascot here. He's
in sometime around 1978 or 79. This is tangent, by the way.
Yeah.
I had Planet of the Apes action figures and from the TV show, and either Burke or Verdon, I can't remember which one had the dark hair. He resembled the action figure resembled Tom Baker.
Oh,
and I had a hat that I could put on him, and I had my grandmother knit me a scale scarf that I could tie around his neck. So I had my own Doctor Who Fourth Doctor action figure that I had built from a Planet of the Apes action figure and a couple of accessories.
and the Dennis Fisher, Tom Baker was not modeled after Tom Baker.
Oh, yes. I remember reading about that. Yeah.
The guy from the New Avengers, apparently, Gambit.
Gareth,
and so they
Gareth Hunt, I think. Yeah.
Gareth Hunt. Yes. Gareth Hunt. So, yeah, that's okay. I mean,
I have basically a complete collection of Doctor Who magazine from not the weeklies, just starting with the monthlies.
So starting with issue 44, I think that would be.
Yeah, and I was buying it myself monthly from like issue 58 or 9 or 60.
Yeah. Okay.
Complete collection of Target paperbacks.
Okay.
I buy every copy of the Armada. Is it the Armada paperback?
The Doctor Who and the Daleks Armada.
The Armada paperback. Also, every Avon paperback that I find, and every Crusaders Green Lion.
Little Dragon.
Okay. Every one of those that I can find. So I've got like a dozen of all of those in varying condition. And I finally got a second copy of the Dalek pocketbook, by the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Got one of those in the
that was pretty hard to find.
Check your Crusaders book. Somebody just told me that there were 2 printings, and it has to do with not on the front page, but the last page of the book. Apparently there's an ad on the second prints, and there's just text on the first print. So you might have a couple variants there. I just found out about that not long ago, and I thought, I better check my copies. Of course, I have all first edition.
Yeah, so I'll take a look.
But that happens sometimes. Anyway, before we go, is it still possible to buy Red, White, and Who online somewhere?
It is. You can still order it directly from ATB Publishing, and that should be atbpublishing.com.
We will double check that link and make sure it's posted on our page. My guest today is Stephen Warren Hill, and you can find, by the way, he is also part of Gallifrey Outpost Online, and which is a big forum, Gallifrey Base. You can buy copies of Red, White, and Who, of course, on our website. We don't make any money on it, but we want you to have it. And of course, you can get tickets and information about Chicago Tardis by going to chicagotardis.com. Thank you so much for being here, Steve.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And stay tuned for the most outrageous offer.
We are going on a journey, a very long journey, through the world of the Target novelizations in publication order. Every week, we are looking at a new book, talking about Terrence Dix, Malcolm Hulke, and all our Doctor Who novelization friends. Whatever you do, keep turning the pages. This is Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast, a member of the Direction Point Podcast Network, and you are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club Podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Allison Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast on the Direction Point Podcast Network. Keep collecting.
All my travellings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
And now it's time for the most outrageous offer. The most outrageous offer is a Doctor Who item or Doctor Who related item that is priced way above where it should be. Come on, folks. I've done a lot of these. This is crazy. Some of these prices just aren't even funny anymore. They're kind of embarrassing and insulting to those of us who have been collecting for more than 3 decades. And some of us who've been collecting less than that. I mean, I hear complaints all the time about, hey, what the heck? People think they can gouge prices from Doctor Who collectors. They can't. Not with this podcast. We won't let that happen. Anyway, the item in question is a Doctor Who book. It's called The Infnity Race by Simon Messingham. Came out, but in 2003. It's not a book that I happen to have in my collection, but I could add it very easily. Anyway, this is from a place called Front Cover Books, and not much about front cover books as far as that goes. There just isn't anything about them. They are from Denver, Colorado, which they could be or may not be. Who knows? They've been online since 2021 with a perfect seller rating. That means maybe they've sold 1 book. It says it's in new condition, and it looks like $4.30 shipping. They're asking $3,077.18. Again, that odd amount always makes me, crazy because it's probably not correct. There's another copy this is on Abe's Books, but there's another copy for slightly less, $3,074.23. So, and then the next one down is $258.77, which is crazy. I did a search on my own outside of this, and I found them averaging anywhere from $25 to $35 on eBay. So you can find this book. Many copies are available. This is crazy. Who's going to pay that? I used to write to the seller and say, "Are you really serious?" But they never respond, or the link disappears. And I have screenshots as well as a link to the item on our webpage. Please don't buy it. Please do not pay $3,000 for this book. It's not worth it, especially a book that's not that old. But there you go. It's it makes me scratch my head quite a bit. These links get sent to me all the time, usually with, please don't mention my name. I don't want people coming after you unless you're the owner of the company and you're trying to get your stuff out there. But no one, I'm saying, do not pay $3,000. Anywhere from $25 to $35 is completely acceptable. So there you go. That concludes the most outrageous offer, and that concludes the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. I want to thank my guest today, Stephen Warren Hill, the principal author of Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America. You can get that at ATB Publishing. Anyway, we'll let you know our next episode will be coming out real soon, so stay tuned and keep collecting.
A Doctor Who Podcast Network.